Have you ever wondered why you do everything right, yet money still never seems to stay? On the first morning of the year, the office parking lot was still covered in a thin layer of fog. Mike sat in his car for a few extra minutes, not because he was lazy, but because his paycheck had just arrived. He opened his banking app. The number looked clean and reassuring, enough to let him exhale. Mike stared at it like a brand new birthday cake. Nice to look at, but he knew it was about to be sliced up. Mike always believed he was responsible. He paid the rent on time, paid his credit cards in full, never missed a car payment. He even paid for a gym membership he went to, maybe twice a month. There was only one person Mike never paid first. That person was Mike. If you earn steady money but still don't have a few $1,000s set aside just in case, you know this feeling. A few seconds of joy on payday, then counting down to the next one. By the end of this video, you'll understand how changing just one small order, paying yourself first, can change everything. After that morning when his paycheck arrived, Mike stayed in his car a little longer. He stared at the number in his account, knowing exactly what was about to happen. The money wouldn't disappear right away, but it would be pulled away, little, by things he had grown used to calling responsibilities. Mike had always taken pride in paying on time. Rent, car payments, credit cards, electricity and water bills, never late. For years, he believed this was what being financially responsible looked like. But there was one question he had never asked himself. After paying everyone else, what was left for him? Saving to Mike was always a plan for whatever remained. If there was anything left at the end of the month, he would save it. But strangely, there was always a reason why nothing remained. A small, unexpected expense. Something he needed to buy quickly. A reward for being completely exhausted. One evening, Mike grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down the order in which he spent his money. The list was longer than he expected, and when he finally reached the word savings, it sat at the very bottom. And just like in real life, that line was often ignored. That's when a painfully simple truth hit him. Whatever comes last on the list is always the first thing to be sacrificed. Not because it isn't important, but because it doesn't demand attention right away. Savings don't send reminder emails, they don't call you, they don't charge late fees. And because of that, Mike always pushed saving aside. When he heard the phrase, "pay yourself first" again, it sounded different this time. Not like a motivational slogan, but like a question. What if saving were treated like a mandatory bill? Something that came first, not last? What would change then? Mike did the math in his head. Just 10% of his income each month, about $500. In 1 year, that would be $6,000. Not wealth, not a life upgrade, but enough to keep him from panicking when something went wrong. For the first time, Mike realized the real problem wasn't that he didn't make enough money. It was that he had been placing himself last in every financial decision he made. Mike understood the logic quickly, but understanding doesn't mean doing. What kept pulling him back into old habits wasn't math, it was emotion. Payday was always the day Mike allowed himself to be a little more relaxed. After a long, exhausting week at work, he felt entitled to a reward. A good meal, a small purchase, a quick swipe of the card without thinking too much about it. I work hard, Mike would tell himself, and that thought was always true. But only half true. Those purchases were rarely big, but they showed up consistently. They made Mike feel better in the moment, then quietly disappeared, leaving behind a shrinking bank balance and an uncomfortable feeling he didn't want to name. Some evenings, Mike would open his banking app and close it just as fast. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want to feel that drop in his stomach when the numbers stared back at him.
I know it's
Linda
hard
never
right
blamed
now,
him.
but
She never lectured.
I have to
She just
ask,
asked one gentle
are you
question.
sure this is what you
What would
want?
we do if something unexpected happened? That question stayed with Mike longer than any argument ever could. It made him realize he was living on hope, hoping nothing would go wrong. To Mike, saving felt like having joy taken away from the present moment. And so he postponed it. Not because he was irresponsible, but because he was using money to treat exhaustion, stress, and pressure. Spending had become his way of coping. It wasn't until Mike finally understood this, that he wasn't bad with money, he was using money to regulate emotions, that something began to shift. For the first time, he stopped seeing money as something meant to make today easier and started seeing it as something that could protect tomorrow. The sound coming from the car wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Mike turn off the radio. He had heard it before, and every time he told himself it was probably nothing. But this time, the feeling in his chest refused to cooperate. That afternoon, Mike parked in front of the house and sat there for a long moment. Not because he was tired, but because he knew that once he stepped inside, he would have to face a familiar question. If I fix the car right now, where does the money come from? Mike opened his laptop and typed in a few search terms. The repair costs weren't shocking. But when he opened his banking app, the truth became clearer than any number on the screen. He had income, but he didn't have a cushion. Linda watched him from across the dinner table. She didn't say a word. And somehow that silence felt heavier than any argument. Mike remembered the question she had asked him before. What would we do if something unexpected happened? Back then, he had brushed it off. Now the answer was sitting right in front of him. That night, Mike didn't sleep well. Not because of the repair bill, but because he realized something deeper. For years, he had been living on a fragile assumption that everything would be fine as long as nothing went wrong. His mind began rearranging numbers. $300 a month, small expenses, little rewards, quick swipes he barely remembered. If he had kept that money instead, in just 5 years, it would have added up to nearly $20,000. No miracle, just discipline. The thought made Mike sit upright in bed. For the first time, he didn't feel uneducated about money. He felt like he had been avoiding the truth. The next morning, when his paycheck came in, Mike didn't give himself time to hesitate. He opened the transfer screen, entered 10% of his income, about $500. His finger hovered for a few seconds. A voice inside him whispered that he might need that money. But another voice, calmer and clearer, answered back, "That's exactly why you never have a safety net." Mike pressed the button. The money left his spending account and moved into a brand new savings account. He gave it a simple name, emergency fund. And in that moment, Mike didn't feel like he had lost anything. He just felt lighter. A few weeks later, Mike started to notice something. His problem wasn't unique, it was everywhere. At lunch, his coworkers talked about new phones, new cars, and vacations paid for in installments. Everyone laughed. Everyone sounded excited. And suddenly, Mike realized he had sat in that exact same seat before, comparing, nodding along, quietly wondering why he always felt behind. 0% interest, someone said. Mike had heard that phrase so many times, he used to believe it was an opportunity, but now he understood something different. 0% didn't mean free. It just meant paying later for a decision that had been made too quickly. Mike began to look at advertisements with new eyes. They weren't lying, but they were only telling half the story. No one mentioned that every small monthly payment was taking up space where savings could have existed. No one said that buy now, pay later often really meant worry now, pay the price later. He thought back to all the times he had upgraded his life. One new purchase made the old one feel outdated. One small decision triggered a chain of spending he had never planned for. Mike realized something important. He wasn't struggling because he lacked discipline. He was struggling because the rules of the game were designed to make him spend before he had time to think. That realization didn't make Mike angry. It made him feel lighter. He stopped blaming himself. He saw that many people around him were stuck in the same cycle, not because they were careless, but because no one had ever taught them how to put their money in the right order. Mike didn't need to change the entire system. He just needed to protect himself from it. And for the first time, he felt like he was no longer being pulled in every direction by the noise around him. Mike didn't turn into a financially perfect person. He still ate out. He still bought things. But there was one rule he no longer negotiated with himself about. Pay yourself first. In the beginning, seeing a smaller spending balance made him uncomfortable. But that feeling didn't last long. It was quickly replaced by something else: control. Mike knew exactly where his money was and what it was meant to do. The emergency fund grew slowly, quietly, but it grew enough for Mike to feel like he was no longer standing exposed when life threw something unexpected his way. Linda noticed the change before he did. Mike was less irritable, less tense. Conversations about money no longer felt heavy or dangerous. When the car needed repairs again, Mike still felt worried. But he didn't panic. He opened the emergency fund, looked at the number, and for the first time he solved the problem without reaching for a credit card. Mike understood something clearly now. This habit wasn't about getting rich fast, it was about becoming less fragile. And for someone who had spent years living with quiet financial anxiety, that was a very real victory. A few months later, payday mornings came the same as always. Mike still sat in his car for a moment before walking into work. But this time, when he opened his banking app, his heart didn't race. The number on the screen didn't excite him. It didn't make him anxious either. It was just there, clean, clear, in order. Mike knew he wasn't rich. He still went to work every day. He still had to plan and calculate. But he had something he never had before: room to breathe. Mike realized something important. Financial freedom doesn't begin with making more money. It begins with paying yourself first, consistently, without negotiation. Not because it's selfish, but because if you don't do it, something else always will. If you see yourself somewhere in Mike's story, getting paid, then counting down to the next paycheck, try starting small. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start. Share your story in the comments. Mike reads everyone. And if you enjoy real financial stories, no hype, no lectures, remember to like and subscribe to meet Mike again every week. Next week, Mike will tell the story of how he lost $3,000 by trusting advice that sounded guaranteed. A costly lesson, literally.